Hello and welcome to my dungeon. Today I want to talk about emergent play and emergent story. That is a concept, phenomenon not wholly unique to tabletop RPG, but one of its biggest strengths, at least in my opinion. It is when, through the contribution of the human element, whatever the GM is doing, whatever the players are coming up with, however the players are reacting to what the GM has come up with, and vice versa, and the random element. What do the dice decide? How do actions come out? Do you win the fight or do you have to run from the fight? Success or failure, and also whatever you roll on random tables. When both of these aspects come together, they form a experience that you really can't have in other forms of entertainment and storytelling traditions. You don't have that in a book, in a movie, not really in video games, unless they become like tabletop role-playing games. This emergent story is one of my biggest draws to tabletop role-playing. I love it when stuff kind of just seems to happen, when moments of great drama, heroism, or tragedy just bubble out of the systems and of the interaction of the play, the table. As a story writer myself, I like to go the exploration writer route, where you make up your characters and locations and then start writing and imagine how it interacts, instead of planning all of your story beats before you start writing. Potentially from the end of the story, where you want to be at some point, and then plan it from end to beginning, so you know exactly what you have to write down. And while I find that process is faster and easier than exploration writing is more fun to me. It's like playing a role-playing game, but all of the rules, all of the players and their characters, it's just all me. It's just whatever I come up with. But somehow you're still completely in control of the situation, and it's seldom you're surprising yourself. But in a TTRPG, that kind of stuff happens all the time, especially if you take steps to not only let it happen, but to make it happen. And there are a few concepts you can implement in your game. I mean, the least amount of emergent story you would have if you are playing a story-focused pre-written campaign, which many official D&D modules are nowadays. In those, you just lead the group from predetermined scene to predetermined scene. Maybe there's a forking path somewhere, but at the end they go to fight the big baddie. There is emergent storytelling somewhere along that path, but is limited by the structure of the adventure. You get more spontaneous improvisation if you are planning a more open adventure, an adventure sandbox where you have your locations, your characters, your NPCs, potential challenges that might arise, and then you throw the player characters into that sandbox, let them do whatever they want, and see what the hell happens. And if you put enough dramatic potential in your sandbox beforehand, enough conflict, enough inciting incidents that get the action started, enough relations between the characters and potential conflict between the characters, if their goals are completely different, if they belong to different factions that are at odds with each other, or have completely different morale and outlook on life, and if these different goals and viewpoints and morals come into conflict with each other in this sandbox, then you get great emerging drama. You could also incorporate more random elements into your game. For example, random encounter tables. I found that the Forbidden Lands had really great random encounters for the travel. When you would travel from hex to hex, at like D66 random encounters. And what I would do is, if these random encounters just happen by die roll, I would then incorporate them into the story, make it seem as though it was planned or that it emerged natural from whatever is happening into the world. So if the characters would meet a story important NPC by random chance, I would come up with a reason why that character is there, what that character can tell the characters. And then they might just part ways, but they could also get into conflict, into a fight, or they might become allies. And at one point, I had one of the important plot NPC join the party for a time to further her own agenda, of course. Or at some time, the group would find a riderless horse, and there's blood on the saddle, and there's a letter in the saddlebags with a signet ring. And as the characters would likely take the horse and the ring, when the players follow up on that line in the next town and ask around, what is this ring, what is this signet, they would eventually find out that it came from a certain castle, from a certain aristocratic family, and they could potentially go back there and give the ring and the horse back and tell what they found and get a reward for that. And then you could use the location of the castle as the sandbox for your next adventure, and that all just came out from one random encounter on the road. Or an adventure like Petrus and Regnant, it has random tables for the motivations, sometimes the origin of the main NPCs in this. And that can quite change what this adventure feels like, what it plays like. Now, you're probably not going to replay this adventure with the same group, but if you are running it for different groups, and you're using these random tables, you will have a very different game each time that you are running it, not only because you have different players with different characters, but because change and randomness is built into the adventure. Now, aside from randomness, you can incorporate more of the human element into your play style. In this case, meaning the players and their creativity. You can ask them for questions, of course, everything containing to their character. What is the character's background? Why is your character here? What do they want to do? And you can take that as an opportunity to have them insert elements into the world and into the story. Like, I'm a thief from the Thieves Guild and we're at war with the Assassins Guild. And even if you didn't plan that out for your world initially, you can then take that idea and incorporate it into your sandbox world. Now you have 2 warring factions more, and one of your player characters is already involved with this conflict. So you can make great use of that in your adventures. But you can do that, of course, spontaneously during the game. If the characters are searching through a room full of crates or something, you can ask them, what are you looking for actually? And then they will tell you what they're looking for, what they want and need at the moment. Be it a hint to see what is going on, be it some resources that they are low on that they really need. And then you can say, okay, well, that might be in there, give me an investigation roll or something. I'm not a big fan of rolling on spot hidden or or anything to give the players the hints and the information they need to solve the adventure. But if it is something that just might come up, something that they are looking for, but that is not like pre-planned, then I like to let them roll. And if they succeed, they can have that. They get that additional hint. They get that additional resource. You can use this like collaborative world building right from the start. The Perilous Wilds or the Black Sword Hack have methods of creating the gaming world together. In the Perilous Wilds, the whole group will gather around the table with a big sheet of paper and then just start drawing the map, and everyone gets to insert their ideas into the map, and then everyone can build on each other's idea, and you get this big stew of ideas at the end of it. You can just place the party somewhere in that map and then start exploring it. And the Perilous Wilds was meant to be played with Dungeon World, which is a variant of Powered by the Apocalypse. And these Powered by the Apocalypse games are meant to be played with the human factor and randomness and improvisation at all time. You really don't prepare adventures for Dungeon World. It's more like you play to find out. Often not you as the GM will ask the players for a check, but the players will initialize the action with a move their character makes. That move might be to search the room. If they roll well, then they can take certain aspects, what they want to find, what information they want to find. And here the players get to choose what is actually in that room. The room is like a blank quantum state before the players enter it and start interacting with it. And then in there they might find what they're looking for if they are rolling well, and ask the question, what's really going on here? Or is there anything useful in this room? And then you on the spot have to come up with the answer. Yeah, not everything in this room is as it seems. There's a secret door hidden behind a curtain. And the secret door just goes into existence because the players were looking for something that is not as it seems. And if the characters are rolling badly, then you make a GM move. You raise the stakes, raise the dangers, then there are the traps, there are the monsters. In a game like Mythos World, for example, this system is used to heighten the stakes of the story as it progresses. So you start with a very little threat. You haven't really seen the monster, you don't know what's going on. And if bad stuff happens, maybe your characters get a scare or a scratch. But each time that the players fail the die rolls, they have to choose. Do they want to lose some equipment? Do they want to get wounds? Or maybe increase the danger? And then you get to introduce more direct threats from the monster. Everything just becomes more dangerous and high stakes until eventually you come to the big finale of the adventure where the monster is fully visible. Maybe there's several, maybe it's grown super big. And each further failed roll might have dire consequences for the characters. This system is just meant to naturally have the story emerge of the back and forth between what the players want, what the players are looking for, and then what you as the GM can come up with at the spot. And I've run some campaigns of Dungeon World that have stuck in my memory because of the story that had emerged. We would draw the map together And then we had like barbarians in the north and a central kingdom full of golden wheat fields and apocalyptic red dragon somewhere there with like ashen wastes. And the characters started small, just exploring the dungeon, because their characters were just level 1 at that point. They would fail more rolls than they would succeed at. So eventually they had to flee the dungeon and were just looking for a safe place to stay. And it just became a survival horror adventure at that point. Anytime they would look for a safe spot to make camp, they would fail the roll, so something bad would happen. Monsters would chase them. And eventually, when they finally got that safe spot to camp and regain their resources, they had also gained a few levels from the experience they got from all that failure. So now the dynamic had shifted. Now they could go back into the dungeon and find it cleared. And then the story would shift to the other locations, and they would get to interact with the dragon and say to themselves, nah, we have to kill that dragon. Then it became this grand quest to actually find the weapons they would need to kill that dragons. And then they had the epic fight against the dragon. And they would explore the witch's hut we had placed on the map. Or the barbarian would go to fight his brother, who had become chieftain of the barbarians after betraying the player character and leaving him for dead. So all of these elements, the characters' backgrounds, everything that I and the players put onto that map, we could just go through that, work with that, and through the die rolls and all of the improvisation that Dungeon World lives on, the story just kinda happened, and it was epic. The drawback here is that in my experience and that of my friend who has also run Dungeon World for us, is that it is mentally exhausting to run. Because you have to come up with so much stuff just on the spot. It's like you're running a marathon with just your brain. And after a 3-hour, even 4-hour gaming session, you will be just creatively, mentally exhausted. I find it is much easier to run a game that you have prepared beforehand. It's like all of that work and creative energy, you have already put it in there, and then at the time of the game, you can focus on other things and you have more room to just sit back and relax because you've put that work already in. So nowadays I try to strike a balance with having some of the adventure prepared beforehand, but in there I leave the room, or I leave the random tables, I leave the big adventure sandbox to have the room for this spontaneous emergence of story, to see what the players are coming up with, what they are looking for, and incorporate into there, to see what the random tables come up with. But I have enough of a framework that I don't have to come up with everything on the spot. And that's just like how I like to run and how I like to play my games. Now, what about you? Have you had any great stories just emerge from the game? And what is your favorite game for this emerging story kind of style? Let me know in the comments below. For now, I bid thee farewell, dreamers, until we shall meet again.